So in general, competitive markets, the thing that we're going to be studying and kind of the most theoretical of all of the market types, where there's many sellers and there's many buyers and it's easy to get into the industry, right? So some markets are like this, right? But not all. And we'll talk about the different types of markets later on. So competitive markets generally do well at allocating society's scarce resources to their highest valued uses. However, that's not to say that it's perfect. Market failure can occur, and that's when the competitive markets break down. So what's the first form? The first form of market failure is when the market allocates no resources to the provision of certain goods. And we'll say goods and services, just to be more general. And then the second main way that market failure can happen is that the market under or over allocates to the production of certain goods and services. And so as a result of this all, the government can play a role in reallocating these resources when and where private markets fail. And how do they fail? Great question. That's what we're going to talk about in section 2. Market failures in competitive markets. So obviously market failures can occur in competitive markets. That's what the A is, so we're not even going to bother saying that. It's literally just the definition, the title. So we'll jump right to B. Demand side market failures. So demand side market failures occur at times because it's impossible to always charge people what they are willing to pay. So fireworks is one example. There's no way to prevent people who didn't pay for fireworks from watching them. So for the same exact reason, I really like flowers. Right? You know, there's a lot of people in town, you know, some of my friends included, they spend a lot of time and money and effort on their gardens and their flowers and having everything look nice. And when I take my bike rides and my walks around town, I get to enjoy that, right? But I didn't pay any money for that. So that's a demand side failure. So as a result, private firms, therefore, are not as willing to produce the fireworks because of all these free riders. So we also have some issues, market failure issues, when it comes to supply side. So this one occurs when the producer fails to pay the full costs of production. So one of our most obvious examples here is pollution. So the firm pays for all the resources it uses, but it doesn't pay for the pollution it creates. Whether it's oil leaking into the ground or sawdust in the rivers or particulates in the air, right? These are, you know, companies that, you know, say our power company, right? We buy power from this power company and there's this externality, right? There's this market failure. There's this third thing that happens that impacts people that are outside of the transaction between me and my power company. My power company ends up polluting something, right? The air, the river, the property that it's on, some kind of thing like that, right? You know, unless somehow it's all gone renewable, which, you know, it hasn't. So, you know, for the moment, every bit of power and stuff that we're using, I mean, even just driving around, right, creates pollution. So that's creating this negative thing that's impacting everybody else besides, you know, the people that participated in that transaction, right? So me and the Maverick gas station, when I bought the gas from them, right? But then there's this external cost that impacts not just Maverick and me, it impacts everybody. So as a result, the firm produces more electricity and pollution than the firm would produce if they paid for the pollution they emit. Any questions on demand and supply side externalities? So again, pollution's the main one for supply, and I like flowers for demand. The other classic one for demand is vaccinations, which has become politicized. But before, flu vaccines used to be the default one that we would use when talking about positive externalities, because when you get a flu vaccine, or when you have your kid get a flu vaccine, it's not just decreasing the likelihood that your kid would get sick or that you would get sick, or that it's decreasing the likelihood that anybody that your kid comes in contact with will get sick. So there's a positive externality of vaccinations, which is why, in my eyes, none of the money should have been given to us for free. It should have been like, you can have $500. If you want $1,500, go get vaccinated. It should have been a pay-for-play kind of program, but it was not my decision. So we have efficiently functioning markets. So there's some jargon that we have to learn here. I apologize. So efficiency, just a reminder, what does efficiency mean? It means it's the most amount of output with the least amount of input, right? So to be efficient. But to be efficient in this sense, in the market failure sense, failure context, more like, not sense. To be efficient, 1, demand must reflect all customers' willingness to pay. So, you know, flowers should be subsidized because I enjoy those flowers, right? So, like, you know, the city of Chadron should have a beautification program that, you know, gives you $1 off. You know, you can get reimbursed for $1 on every, you know, flower bloom or whatever. You know, I don't know, they figure it out somehow, but essentially give people money back for doing this kind of thing, right? Because other people than just the people that are planting and have the yards are enjoying the experience of the beautiful town that we're living in. Secondly, supply must fully reflect all costs of production. So I'm going to leave you with 2 more definitions, and then we will pick up on Thursday with public and private goods and all of their definitions and things like that. And then I'll also I'll tell you guys a quick story before we leave today about a negative externality and kind of a nice solution that happened. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's get to B. So this is one of the buzz terms, one of the jargony, bolded terms that you need to know: productive efficiency. So this is the production of a particular good in the least cost way. So when economists talk about just efficiency without any kind of further modifier before it, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about productive efficiency. But there's also this stupid form of efficiency called allocative efficiency, which is very rarely talked about, probably because it has a stupid name. Talking about allocation, right? This is talking about allocation. And so this definition is that we are using the particular mix of goods and services most highly valued by society. And we're assuming that the minimum cost production is already achieved. So what does it mean by most highly valued? It's also talking about that all of the costs are internalized. So, one of the neat stories when we talk about you know, these efficiently functioning markets and you know, the fact that they're not always efficiently functioning, right? So, you know, when we talk about pollution and things like that, right? That the firm produces more electricity and pollution than they would if they had to pay for the pollution that they emit, right? So I don't know exactly the year. I probably should to make the story a bit better. But at some point, the rivers, I'm pretty sure it was in New York, were starting to get really laden with all this sawdust from all this milling, right? From all of this, you know, the trees that in the, you know, paper pulp and making furniture and paper and all this other kind of stuff. And what would they do with the extra little bits of stuff that weren't enough to, you know, make it, or the sawdust? They would just throw it in the river. Right. Well, the river, you know, downhill, that, you know, all of the fish were dying, and, you know, the people that were, you know, they couldn't fish anymore, and, you know, the ecosystem starts to get all screwed up, right? So the government comes in and they say, okay, you can't do this anymore. You can't put sawdust in the river, right? They didn't tell them what to do. They didn't tell them, here's what you're going to do with the sawdust, right? So it was a more open kind of constraint than maybe some other things these days, like we see, like, you know, they're like, oh, you have a coal plant, well, you need to put this kind of smokestack filter on top of it, right? So that's like a very specific prescription, right? So they just said, you can't do this anymore. This is bad. This is bad for everybody. You can't do it anymore. So firms had to start paying for, you know, dump trucks to come and take this away to the landfill, right? And so for a little bit, what happened, that ended up increasing the cost, increasing the price of paper and furniture and all this other kind of stuff. Well, there was a new invention. Somebody figured out a way to, or there was like a new glue that was invented or something like that, like a hot glue, right? That they hadn't done before. You know those hot glue guns, right? So hot glue was invented, and some guy was like, you know, I bet I could take this hot glue and these bits and pieces of little, you know, wood and all the sawdust, and I could press it together in a hydraulic press and put it all together and let it cool, and I could make something useful out of it. And that was how particle board was born. And so this guy ended up getting paid to come and get the inputs for his new product, particle board, which, as we know, is a staple in construction and American life everywhere. Came from government saying, hey, quit doing that. And out of that, innovation, entrepreneurship emerged. So that's like the best story of correcting a negative externality, correcting pollution. All right, I'll see you all on Thursday. Thanks a lot.